Hello guys, in this lecture we'll be dealing with the physiology of anterior pituitary gland. We'll be dealing with introduction and anatomy, hormones of anterior pituitary, the regulation of hormone secretion, growth hormone and prolactin. These two we'll be discussing in detail as they're very important hormones. Introduction. Pituitary gland is also called as hypophysis. It's located on the base of the brain in sella turcica, a small cavity in the sphenoid bone. Physiologically, it is divided into anterior pituitary or adenohypophysis and posterior pituitary or neurohypophysis. This anterior pituitary is rich in endocrine cells and secretes different hormones, while the posterior pituitary or neurohypophysis is rich in neurons, and their main role is to store and secrete the hormones of hypothalamus. So we should understand about difference between the anterior pituitary and posterior pituitary. Now moving on to the anterior pituitary gland, we'll see it in detail. It secretes 6 hormones, and the endocrine cells of anterior pituitary are divided into 2 types on the basis of stains they take up. Acidophilic cells, they are stained strongly with acidic dyes, while the basophilic cells stain strongly with basic dyes. There are 2 acidophilic cells, somatotrophs and lactotrophs. Somatotrophs secrete growth hormone or somatotrophin, while the lactotrophs secrete prolactin. There are 3 basophilic cells, corticotrophs, thyrotrophs and gonadotrophs. Corticotrophs secrete ACTH or corticotrophin. Thyrotrophs secrete thyroid stimulating hormone. Gonadotrophs secrete follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. The growth hormone and prolactin secreted by the acidophilic cells are also called as twin hormones, as there are only 2 hormones secreted by the acidophilic cells. We'll discuss in brief about the action of these hormones, and we'll discuss in detail about the growth hormone and prolactin. The brief actions: thyrotrophin, it stimulates the thyroid gland and increases the secretion of thyroid hormones, that is T3 and T4. The growth hormone, its main role is to increase the growth of bones and cartilages, and it has growth promoting activity overall. Next, moving on to adrenocorticotrophic hormone, it stimulates the adrenal cortex and increases the secretion of glucocorticoids, that is cortisol. An important point to note here is that ACTH controls the secretion of adrenal cortex only and not adrenal medullary hormones. Adrenal medullary hormones are independent of ACTH. Next, follicle stimulating hormone, it stimulates the maturation of ovarian follicle in females and stimulates spermatogenesis in males. Luteinizing hormone, it increases the sex hormones in females, that is estrogen and progesterone, and increases the synthesis of testosterone in testes in males. The last hormone is prolactin. It is the hormone of milk synthesis that normally increases after parturition in the mother to feed the baby. Next we'll be moving on to the regulation of hormone secretion, and then we'll discuss about the growth hormone and prolactin. The regulation of hormone secretion, there are 2 types of regulation. One is hypothalamic regulation and the other is the feedback regulation. The hypothalamic regulation is of 2 types, either stimulatory or inhibitory. Whenever the hypothalamus secretes hormone releasing substance or stimulatory substance, it stimulates the anterior pituitary gland, and the anterior pituitary gland stimulates trophic hormone, and it stimulates the endocrine gland, and the hormone is secreted by the endocrine gland. Whenever inhibitory substance is produced by the hypothalamus, it inhibits the anterior pituitary gland, and the endocrine gland does not synthesize any hormone. This is about the hypothalamic regulation of hormones. Next is the feedback regulation of hormones. The hormone secreted by the endocrine gland either stimulates its own synthesis or inhibits its own synthesis by 2 mechanisms. One is through positive feedback mechanism and the other is through negative feedback mechanism. First we'll see what is positive feedback mechanism. When the endocrine gland secretes hormones, and when this hormone will stimulate the anterior pituitary gland or hypothalamus, the hormone synthesis increases, and this is called positive feedback mechanism. So we'll see the mechanism. Whenever it stimulates anterior pituitary or hypothalamus, stimulating hormone increases and the trophic hormone synthesis also increases, and it will increase the hormone secretion. Whenever hormones synthesized by the endocrine gland will inhibit the hypothalamus, it produces inhibitory substance, and whenever it inhibits anterior pituitary, trophic hormone synthesis is decreased, and this ultimately will lead to decreased production of hormones by the endocrine gland. So this is about the positive and negative feedback mechanism. Let me give you an example of positive feedback mechanism. The hormone prolactin, whenever it is secreted, it will stimulate its own production by stimulating the anterior pituitary again and hypothalamus also, and the production of prolactin will ultimately increase. This is seen in during nursing of the baby. Negative feedback mechanism, whenever there is excess T3 or T4 is produced, this T3 or T4 will inhibit the anterior pituitary secretion of thyroid stimulating hormone. So the thyroid gland is not stimulated and there is decreased secretion of T3 and T4. Okay, that's all about the regulation. One is hypothalamic regulation and the other is feedback regulation. Next, we'll be seeing about growth hormone in detail. Growth hormone. It is a peptide hormone with 191 amino acids. It is also called as somatotrophin, and it is an anabolic hormone. What is meant by anabolic? Anabolic means building up. It normally builds up the metabolites of metabolism and does not cause destruction. And it has both short-term metabolic effects and long-term growth-promoting effects. Okay, look at this graph. This graph shows the variation in growth hormone secretion in 24 hours. Growth hormone secretion is increased during strenuous exercise so as to provide energy for the muscles, and also during early hours of deep sleep, growth hormone synthesis is increased. When we look at the age group, adolescents age group have increased growth hormone secretion and elderly people have decreased growth hormone secretion. So these two variations are very important. Next, we'll discuss about these two effects, that is metabolic effects and long-term growth promoting effects in detail. First, moving on to action of specific tissues on bones and cartilages, this growth hormone causes bone growth and cartilage growth. So it acts accordingly such that it causes growth of bones and cartilages. First, it increases the deposition of protein by the chondrocytic and osteogenic cells that cause bone growth. Okay, what is chondrocytic and osteogenic cells? Chondrocytic cells are cartilage forming cells and osteogenic cells are bone forming cells. There is increase in reproduction of these cells, and there is specific effect of growth hormone which converts chondrocytic cells to osteogenic cells. That is, it can form bones from cartilages. On muscles, it causes increased muscle mass by increased protein synthesis, and on the soft tissues and organs, it increases their size. Also, an important point on bones, it increases the stimulation of osteoblasts. In bones, we have both osteoblast and osteoclast, but osteoblast is the bone forming cell. It increases the stimulation of osteoblasts and increases the growth of bones, but does not stimulate or act on osteoclast, which is the bone destructing cell. So it promotes growth of bone, muscles, organs, and soft tissues. On metabolic functions, we'll be discussing in detail about three metabolism: the protein metabolism, the carbohydrate metabolism, and fat metabolism. First, we'll discuss the protein metabolism. In protein metabolism, I have told you growth hormone is an anabolic hormone. So it causes the buildup of protein stores. That is, it increases protein synthesis. So it increases protein synthesis by following ways. It enhances the amino acid transport through cell membrane. And there is enhanced translation of RNA to cause protein synthesis. And there is increased nuclear transcription of DNA to form RNA. And there is decreased catabolism of proteins and amino acids. All these four steps will lead to the increased protein synthesis and storage in the cells. On fat metabolism, growth hormone enhances fat utilization as a source of energy even when there is carbohydrates and proteins for using of energy. It enhances the It enhances the mobilization of free fatty acids from the adipose tissue, and this free fatty acid is converted to acetyl-CoA and used as energy. But whenever there is excess growth hormone, the excess free fatty acids are liberated, and the excess free fatty acid are converted to acetyl-CoA, and it is transformed to acetoacetate, and ketone bodies are produced and giving the effect of ketogenic effect. On carbohydrate metabolism, it is called growth hormone is also called as pro-diabetogenic hormone as it increases the blood glucose level. So there is decreased peripheral utilization of glucose in skeletal muscles, and there is increased production of glucose by the liver. And this process is called gluconeogenesis. This glucose production is from non-carbohydrate sources. And there is increased insulin secretion. So we have to remember in metabolism, It enhances protein synthesis. It uses fat as a source of energy, and on carbohydrate metabolism, it is a pro-diabetogenic hormone, and it increases the blood glucose level, and there is increased production of glucose also. Next we'll be seeing some indirect actions. So far we have discussed direct actions. Now we'll be seeing the indirect actions. These indirect actions are mediated by certain substances produced by the liver called somatomedins. And there are two somatomedins, insulin-like growth factor 1 and insulin-like growth factor 2. Insulin-like growth factor 1 or somatomedin C plays an important role in skeletal and cartilaginous growth, while insulin-like growth factor 2 plays an important role in fetal growth. Okay. Somatomedins have longer half-life than growth hormone. So this is an important point. Normally, growth hormone in our body is carried by transport proteins and released rapidly, and their T half is only 20 minutes. So their action time is less, while somatomedins are carried through special transport proteins and they are released slowly, and their T half is around 20 hours. So they have longer half-life than growth hormone, and they can exert their action for a longer period, and this is an advantage of somatomedins over the growth hormone. Here remember insulin-like growth factor 1 and 2. Okay, next, the factors that stimulate the growth hormone secretion. As I said, growth hormone increases blood glucose level, free fatty acid level, and amino acid level. Decreased conditions of this will increase the growth hormone secretion, and starvation, fasting, exercise, testosterone will also increase, and deep sleep will also increase growth hormone secretion. And the growth hormone releasing hormone, which is synthesized by the hypothalamus, will also increase the secretion of growth hormone. Last hormone is ghrelin. Okay, what is ghrelin? It is a hormone secreted during starvation. During starvation, there is decreased glucose level, and this ghrelin will all stimulate the growth hormone secretion, which ultimately will increase the blood glucose and brings the body to normal state. That's all the hormones that increase. Next, moving on to the hormones that inhibit growth hormone secretion. Whenever there is increased blood glucose level or blood-free fatty acids, growth hormone secretion is decreased, and in aged persons, in obese persons also, growth hormone secretion is low. And whenever hypothalamus secretes growth hormone inhibiting hormone, that is somatostatin, growth hormone secretion decreases, and exogenous growth hormone administration will decrease the growth hormone secretion. Moving on to the applied physiology of growth hormone. Whenever growth hormone is secreted low or increased, it leads to clinical manifestations. Deficiency of growth hormone will result in dwarfism. It is a condition characterized by short stature, delayed bone and sexual maturation, decreased muscle and total body mass. These three features is characteristic of dwarfism, because normal growth hormone will cause increased bone growth and increased muscle mass, but whenever growth hormone is decreased, there is delayed bone growth and so short stature, and there is also decreased muscle mass. And an important point here, there is no mental retardation in growth hormone dwarfism, but the people with thyroid dwarfism, they are mentally retarded. So remember this point. There are people are mentally normal, while thyroid dwarf are mentally retarded. Another condition called Laron dwarfism. In this condition, there is normal growth hormone secretion, but the growth hormone receptors are mutated so that the growth hormone cannot act on the receptors. But this condition also seen as deficiency of growth hormone. But actually, hormone secretion is normal, but only the receptor is mutated, but so that growth hormone action is not seen. Okay, next we'll see about the hypersecretion of growth hormone. It will lead to two conditions. One is called acromegaly, whenever the growth hormone secretion is more hypersecreted after the fusion of epiphysis, and the other condition is called gigantism, whenever there is hypersecretion of growth hormone before the fusion of epiphysis. That is, hypersecretion will lead to either acromegaly or gigantism. We'll discuss them in detail. First, we'll be seeing about the clinical features of gigantism. In gigantism, the height of the person increases up to 8 feet, and there is large hands and feet. There is also soft tissue enlargement, and as growth hormone increases blood glucose level, excess growth hormone will even lead to full-blown diabetes mellitus. And all the features of pan-hypopituitarism are seen if it is due to a tumor. What is panhypopituitarism? Panhypopituitarism means deficiency of all anterior pituitary hormones. So it will be manifested as loss of sexual functions, decreased immunity, features of hypothyroidism as TSH is not secreted, features of adrenocortical insufficiency as ACTH is not secreted, and also weight gain. These are the clinical features of gigantism. As increased hormone, there is increased height, that will lead to gigant. Gigant means very tall, that is the person is up to 8 feet tall. Okay, understood the clinical features of gigantism? Okay, I'll show you a picture so that you will be very clear and see knowing what is gigantism and what is dwarfism. See, this picture shows a normal 10-year person, a dwarf 10-year person, and a gigant person. The normal person is around 130 centimeter at the age of 10 years, while the dwarf is around only 90 centimeter. This shows that he is a short stature as there is deficiency of growth hormone. A gigant is around 150 centimeter. He is very tall because of excess growth hormone secretion before the fusion of epiphyses, which will lead to increased bone length, which made him so tall. Understood? This picture shows very clearly and make you understand a dwarf and gigant. Next, moving on to the clinical features of acromegaly. Acromegaly means acral means peripheral parts, megaly means enlargement. There is marked enlargement in the peripheral parts, that is bones of hands and feet. There is also enlargement of membranous bones like cranium, nose, and bones of forehead. And there is prominent supraorbital ridge. And there is enlargement of soft tissues like tongue, liver, and kidneys. And sometimes portions of vertebra may also increase. And this all soft tissue enlargement is also seen. Okay, I have given you a picture that will make you understand more clearly. Okay. Okay. Next, see the picture. The first part shows the macroglossia, that is enlargement of tongue, and this side part shows prognathism. Prognathism is nothing but the protrusion of lower jaw, and there is spade-like hands, that is enlargement of the peripheral parts of hand. There is peripheral part of bone is increased in size, and there is increased heel pad thickness, and hyperglycemia is a characteristic feature, and there is bitemporal hemianopia, papilloedema, and there is hepatic enlargement, splenic enlargement, and renal enlargement. That is, all the soft tissues are enlarged, and there is thickening of lips, and there is hoarse voice, and also there is a characteristic feature called osteoarthritis of bone, and testicular atrophy is also a feature of acromegaly. I think this picture will make you remember all the characteristic features of acromegalic patient. Okay. That's all about the growth hormone. Next, we'll move on to prolactin. This hormone is secreted by the lactotroph cells. Okay, pro means favor and lactin means lactogenesis. Then prolactin means hormone for milk synthesis. The prolactin level is increased during pregnancy, lactation, and during sleep, exercise, and stress. And decreased prolactin is seen under dopamine when dopamine is secreted. Dopamine is called as prolactin inhibitory substance produced by the hypothalamus, and also dopamine agonists like levodopa and bromocriptine will also decrease the prolactin secretion. That's all about conditions increase and decrease prolactin. Next, we'll see a graph. This graph shows, this is a graph after parturition. Immediately after parturition, the estrogen and progesterone decreases, but the prolactin level increases, but not in a continuous manner. Why? Prolactin level reaches a peak, decreases, reaches peak, decreases. Why? Whenever the mother nurses the baby, prolactin level increases. During non-nursing time, prolactin level decreases. This type of hormone secretion is called intermittent secretion of prolactin during nursing. That is, only during the nursing time, the prolactin hormone will increase, that is by positive feedback mechanism, and this will further increase the hormone secretion during the nursing time. So it is called as intermittent secretion of prolactin during nursing, and it is also an example of positive feedback mechanism. Prolactins initially secreted will further increase the secretion of prolactin. Okay, so we get a high peak, low, high, and low. That's all in this graph. Next, moving on to the applied physiology, we say it as lactational amenorrhea. What lactation? During lactation, there is amenorrhea. Why? Whenever after parturition there is increased prolactin in nursing mothers. Thus increased prolactin will inhibit the GnRH secretion. So automatically whenever GnRH secretion is decreased, it will not stimulate the anterior pituitary, and there is decreased luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone. So whenever luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone secretion decreases, there is no production of estrogen and progesterone, which is required for producing ova. So there is anovulation and it leads to amenorrhea. This is a method of natural contraception also. So that is after parturition, during nursing time, there is amenorrhea, and that time it will lead to lactational amenorrhea. That's all. Thank you.